Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, where I get to sit with my guest and talk about their perspective on movies. And I'm being joined by my friend Erin here. Now, Erin and I have known each other, ugh, what, 6, maybe 7 years at this point. We met at Ryder. We both worked as SI leaders, and I was Erin's mentor. And now we're friends and we keep in contact, and now we're going to be talking about some movies today. So
Yay.
I'm excited to have Erin on, and I'm going to start things off like I always start things off by asking, so Erin, what is your favorite film?
Okay, so I'll preface it by saying I really like really bad accents. So I'm a big fan of the Boston and Long Island accents that might play into my picks here. But I like probably my favorite are like a Good Will Hunting or The Town, very Boston oriented.
Especially because I know you're from Connecticut, so it makes a lot of sense. Us Northeast people.
Yes.
I remember because, like, obviously, I think a lot of people have seen Good Will Hunting and have probably at least quoted "How you like them apples" at some point in their life. And
God, you hope so.
yeah, The Town, I love that. And
Good movie.
movie's intense. And you know what's crazy is what I went to Boston. God, this was 2 summers ago now, because it definitely wasn't this past summer. Welcome to quarantine land. But like, I got to go on a tour of Fenway Park for the first time, and I'm just like, they robbed this place.
Right. Well, and I always like a little bit of that Robin Hood-esque-ness underneath it all. Not that they were really, taking the money and giving it to people who really needed it, but I don't know. I like that they were smart and that they got to keep it and that they beat the system to get paid. And I was kind of like, as bad as it is, I like that a little bit.
Well, and for the longest time, it's just like, not gonna lie, Ben Affleck was kind of a joke to a lot of people for a while there, and then
Yes.
he's a really talented director.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was a really intense film, and Jeremy Renner kind of scared me in that. His friends, like, not somebody you want to mess around with. So,
Right.
but like, watching Good Will Hunting, it's just like basically anything Robin Williams says in that movie hits so hard.
Gold. It's
And
gold.
even just from like the little things where he's talking about his wife's farts, and that's how he remembers her. But like, it's such a great movie.
So
Now, Erin, what do you remember as one of your earliest memories of going to the movies?
Okay, so I was thinking about this and I was kind of like, oh, you think about going into the movies, and I'm not a big movie goer. I'm definitely more of a homebody. So honestly, pandemic life has not been bad. But but I remembered the first time going to a drive-in and
Okay.
like having to turn the radio onto it. And the movie we saw was Spirit, I think, the one with the horse.
Okay.
And I remember that and I was like, oh, that's such a better, like, very early memory of movies. And it was so fun. And I don't know. That was probably my earliest childhood memory of it.
And that's interesting because it took me until I was 28 years old to go to a drive-in for the first time. And
Really?
it was actually the pandemic that actually got me to go to the drive-in for the first time.
Oh, did you love
Because
it? Well, yeah, like you have to tell me what you thought of it since you're such
it,
a big movie goer.
so it was definitely an adjustment because like I'm used to going to the movie, so I'm like it's a very controlled environment.
Mhm.
And you go to the drive-in, and the first one that I saw was Russell Crowe's movie Unhinged that came out back in August. And which was interesting seeing a movie about road rage at the drive-in. And like it was an interesting experience. Like you're listening through the radio and everything. And I've seen quite a few handful of movies, and I remember seeing Tenant back in September, which like being able to control the volume during that movie was actually nice.
Yes, yep.
I'm like, what are they saying? Just like turn this up a bit, and then music hits like, no, turn this back down, I'm gonna blow out my eardrums. But what was most interesting was between November and December going, in the car when it's cold out and trying to regulate any sense of temperature in your car. And also the windows kept fogging up. And it's just like, I can't see the movie anymore.
God damn it.
But like it's a fun and interesting experience going to the drive-in. And it's funny because one of my favorite early memories of seeing a movie was also a DreamWorks movie, was seeing Shrek.
Oh, love Shrek.
I was 10 years old, and like more than half of those jokes did not hit me when I was 10 years old. But now get all of them and they're hilarious.
I love that.
Apparently, because my mom and my aunt took us, and apparently my mom was like, "What?" when Gingy's like, "Eat me," and it's just like, now.
Now,
what
but
the
as a
joke
kid,
is.
you would have been like, oh, what?
It's like, ha ha, the cookie said eat me because you eat cookies, but that's not what they were saying. So it's always fun and it's interesting. And I've brought this up a couple of times, but it's like most of the people that I've interviewed on here have been around my age. And it's just like those memories of going to see animated films as a kid, because like there's been so many of them throughout like the 90s until now. So it's what
It's really
kids.
good one.
Mhm. There's been some great ones. Now, Erin, do you have a particular favorite kind of genre?
Okay, so based off my favorite movie, this is gonna be weird, but like, I'm I get very emotionally invested in movies.
Okay.
So even though emotional driven movies are very good and like you get super into them and you love them and they really leave a mark on you, I have to be like ready to go on an emotional roller coaster. And that's not often. So
Mhm.
my favorite genre is actually probably comedy because I'm like,
Okay.
okay, I can sit down and know that I'm gonna not have to be like up and down through this whole thing.
And sometimes it's just nice to go and it's like, I'm going to laugh and I'm going to enjoy this. And
Yeah.
hopefully it's nice and breezy and we're going to have a fun time. Do you have any particular
Yeah.
favorite
You're not gonna have to
comedy?
overthink. I would say I have an older brother, so he's very influenced by his comedic taste growing up. So like Step Brothers and like Talladega Nights, anything with Will Ferrell, I was like, thought it was the funniest thing because he would often have to have those ones on in the background. So I think that's probably where it comes from.
The fact that I could probably quote all of Step Brothers from start to finish it's just like every time when you see somebody and they look tired, it's watching Cops. It's like they're sitting there sweaty and just like, Cops doesn't come on until 3 o'clock.
Oh my God. And I think this is, I always will be like, there's so much room for activities. Like, I'm just like,
Well, you'll appreciate this because you used to tutor math. Now, I was doing a presentation one time for a bunch of ed majors and teachers, and did my whole presentation on how to make pop culture references in math to help kids learn math. And one of the principles of geometry is if you have two shapes and as long as they don't overlap, you just add their areas together and that's the total area. So if you have two rectangular beds and you want to maximize the amount of room that you have, you make bunk beds because then it's only the area of one and then you have so much more room for activities. And I got a lot of laughs out of that. Right?
So fantastic.
And
Yeah.
Erin knows me, she can see. I would probably do that in the middle of a classroom.
100%. And then you would love the kids that got the joke. And then the kids who did, you just be like, well, it's fine.
Oh, what was it? I'm trying to remember what I referenced in one of my college classes, and I referenced a movie and none of them had seen it, and I'm just like, I'm disappointed. And then I realized this is a bunch of like 18, 19-year-old girls because like my whole entire class were female students. They were a bunch of ed majors. And I'm like, obviously this is not the right audience for this reference here. Just flew right over their heads. I'm just like, well, homework, you should go watch this movie. So got to make the most of it.
That's amazing.
Now,
Keep along with it. It's fine.
now, Erin, do you have any particular favorite like filmmakers, like directors or writers that you like?
Okay, good. So when you said filmmaker, I wrote down a writer. So,
Okay.
and again, I always feel like I have to give backstory to all my answers. I definitely don't pay attention enough to writers and directors of movies.
That is fair.
So I will say I don't have a wide range to choose from, but I started watching West Wing a while back, and then I
Okay.
watched like Molly's Game. I think he directed. I don't think he wrote it, but I am a big fan. From those two, I made a list of all his work and started watching it. So if you can't guess by now, it's Aaron Sorkin.
Oh, Aaron Sorkin is great. And
Okay.
one of the last times I was in New York City, before all of this nonsense happened, he had an adaptation of To Kill a Mockingbird on
Oh
Broadway.
yes, I heard about that.
And I'm like, I wanted to go see it. Tickets were like $500. I'm like,
sure.
Won't be going anytime soon.
Never mind. Disney Plus, could you another adaptation on your site, please?
Like Disney, you put Hamilton on there. You want to put Aaron Sorkin's To Kill a Mockingbird on there?
Do that with everything.
But like Aaron's, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I just remembered too once I said his name. I'm like, duh, of course. And I watched Newsroom, and it was definitely one of my top 3 favorite shows. So I think from that one too. I'd already watched West Wing. I watched that, and then I like went and looked at all his work, and I was like, oh my god, I've seen half of these and loved it. And of course, because he wrote it. So, but Newsroom's definitely I feel like his best work.
I have never actually watched The West Wing, but I just started watching The Newsroom based off of a recommendation from one of my fellow Sith Pop writers, and I got through the first season. I'm like, holy crap! Like even from just like the opening scene where Jeff Daniels just lays it all out there for you, his perspective on America is just like, damn, and that's Aaron Sorkin, like him doing like Molly's Game, which was his first film that he directed, and he wrote that. He just had The Trial of the Chicago 7 come out. He wrote Social Network, which boy does that movie pop. Like just the dialogue and everything, and like I never would have thought that I would care that much about a bunch of like interviews and like trials based off of Facebook. But when Aaron Sorkin writes it, it's really compelling.
It's so amazing. And I'll have to say too, right? Because Newsroom's my favorite. And I feel like a lot of people probably have seen the first 10 minutes. And what you find out is that they've seen the first 10 minutes because it's like, it's such a powerful first 10 minutes, but they don't know it's Newsroom. So I'm always like, no, that video with Jeff Daniels? Like, it's so good. But I will say what's interesting too, and I don't know if, because more directors and writers, if you've seen this. So because I did, I went back and watched all of his work. So except for the new stuff that's coming out, I haven't seen the Chicago 7 yet, but I watched the Sunset Strip one he did, which is not the full title of it. And then Sports Night. And what was interesting to me is that Sports Night was like 2 seasons. The Sunset Strip was 1 season. And then he finally got to Newsroom, which was 3 seasons. And because Newsroom was so good, when I went back and watched those other 2, I was like, those were good, but they didn't make it very far. And I feel like he used those 2 to then, to me, it's like, that's why Newsroom is so much better, because they're all like the same premise, different TV segments, but they're all behind the scenes, producing TV shows and ratings and all of that, right? That I was like, wow, no wonder Newsroom was so good, because it was like his 3rd attempt.
Well, and that's interesting too, because I think sometimes it's like a writer or a director has like an idea in their head, and maybe they're still trying to figure it out, or maybe it's a budget thing, and even like technology. And there's some people out there like a James Cameron who'll literally go out and make his own technology, and which is probably why he's only made like 8, but they're always so successful. And it's an interesting idea where it's like you see somebody create something and you're like, this has some great promise, but maybe it's not fully put together yet. And then as time goes on, it's like maybe they finally hit it. And it's interesting. And what popped in my head first is like, I love Mad Max. You all can see I love Mad Max. And like the first Mad Max film was made for like almost nothing in like the late 1970s. And like the Road Warrior was like a huge thing, but still, it was made for like a couple $1,000,000. Mad Max Fury Road feels like now George Miller has had 30 something years and finally has just a bunch of money. And I feel like this is what he's always wanted to make. And it's just like, you probably couldn't have made that 40 years ago. And
No.
now it's like you have that. And like Aaron Sorkin has definitely evolved. And like he, like the earliest thing I could think of, like he wrote A Few Good Men.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Saw that.
And like it's one of the most famous courtroom films in the history of cinema. And just the whole thing, it's like, I want the truth. And Jack Nicholson just like, so saying like, you can't handle the truth. It's like,
Yes.
put me on that wall. And I'm just like, I remember watching that because like, I felt like I've seen pieces of it when I was younger. And the first time you finally sit down and watch the whole thing, you're just like, this is intense.
Yes.
And like, it's funny because Jack Nicholson's probably in like 10, 15 minutes of the movie, like total.
Right. He's such a short, but like has that line. Like, and what's funny to me, I have to, sorry to cut you off, but
No,
I just have to comment that, like, again, I remember like talking to a friend after and I was like, oh my God, I just watched the movie. Like now I know where that, you can't handle the truth comes from. And she's like, oh, you didn't know it was from that movie? And I was like, no. And I'm like, but then I'm like, but have you watched the whole movie? And they're like, no. And it's like, okay. Like, I mean, you can see where the quote came from, but you have to go and watch it to like, I don't know, it was very, very powerful movie.
well, and it's interesting, especially people our age who's been like, we were teenagers into college with like YouTube.
Yeah.
You can just look up a clip of something, like you can look up anything, and
Yes.
like meme culture.
Yes.
And it's funny because like, so it's slightly off topic, but to the point, like I'm watching Friends for the first time, like all the way through. And I just got to the part where it's like that Joey meme where he's like, and like he's sitting at the chair and I'm like, oh, it's the meme. And it's just like that's the world we live in. It's like we see
Right.
all these memes and like sometimes like I have no idea where this is from.
But it still fits, so I'm still gonna use it. Yeah. It's so
funny.
it's
So
funny.
and Sorkin definitely has those like his dialogue is so great and like those moments just pop like that. Now,
Yeah.
Erin, do you have any particular favorite actors or actresses?
I would say this one was hard for me because I'm not a big fan of like idealizing people. So even though like you see people on the screens, like I try not to get too caught up in like a fanfare kind of thing. So I don't know. I had a hard time. And like the one that came to mind right away was like Blake Lively. And I would say maybe not necessarily for her acting career, but I just think she's like a very like classy, poised woman outside of even acting that I was like, oh, I do like her whenever I see her on stuff. So I'm kind of like talking about not idealizing people. I'm like, well, maybe I idealize her a little bit. But again, maybe not necessarily for acting. I think there's a lot of other better actors out there. But there's just so many. I thought about that question. I was like, oh man, I don't know.
Well, every moment of interactions between her and Ryan Reynolds is like perfect.
That's the other thing. I see that and I'm like, oh, love it.
And the funny thing is like I can't imagine being in a relationship with him, but she goes right back at him and it's really funny. But like,
oh, and she starts it sometimes. I'm like, oh girl.
well, and it's interesting because like I'm pretty sure they met on the Green Lantern movie. And like I didn't really know who Blake Lively was. And then because she's in the town, isn't she?
She's in the town. And then, when you're like, oh, I don't know who Blake Lively was, I'm like, oh, didn't spend a lot of time watching Gossip Girl, did you?
Well, and that's the thing, because I didn't. And then A Simple Favor came out.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen that yet. Looks intense.
She is amazing in it, and it's just like she owns it. And like I really love Anna Kendrick, so
Me
like I
too.
was excited to see it, and then like Blake Lively just steals the show. I'm just like, oh my god. And you can tell from the trailer, she's just this presence in this movie, and it's just like I can't even imagine being on that level of energy, just like not giving a shit, honestly, and just being off the walls like that. But it was actually funny that you brought up Gossip Girl, because I that just debuted on HBO Max,
Oh, it
and it was
did.
like
Okay.
all across the front of the app, and I'm like, oh, it's Blake Lively. Oh, it's Penn Badgley from You, and I'm like, oh, this is where these people came from.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I
Yep.
never watched Gossip Girl, but I'm like, well, now I know. And it's like if I really wanted to, all the seasons are on HBO Max to watch.
All for you.
Now, Erin, is there a particular movie that you feel like you could just pop it in and watch it any day?
Yeah, I would say I do this, and it's one that I've seen a lot. So again, it goes back to that, like, I don't have to have an emotional roller coaster when I watch it. It has the Robin Hood-esque piece. Rabbit and arrows in it, so maybe that explains things too. The Family.
I haven't seen The Family, but I remember when that came out.
Yeah, I don't know why, but like maybe also because like I don't know. A lot of it speaks to me. I think there's like a line in there where he goes, "Oh, like all my sadistic tendencies don't need to come out in real life or go after people who don't deserve it because it's all settled when I use them to go after people who do deserve it." And I'm just like, I don't know why that speaks to me, but it does. So I'm gonna go with it.
Just like channeling that energy.
Exactly.
And it's like it's always nice having that kind of movie where it's just like you could just enjoy it, you could just put it on, and sometimes just cheers you up, and you just
Yeah.
experience. And sometimes it's the weirdest little things that connect with you when you're watching a movie, and I'm just like, why does this resonate with me so much?
That is the thing, and sometimes like because I'm saying The Family, I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna delve too deep into that one because it's a little bit violent, and they're a little bit outside the law, but you know what, we'll just go with
We'll just
it.
go with it. Now, do you have any particular films that you feel like you connect with because it's related to an interest of yours?
Yeah, I would actually say this one was good. So I really like the movie, and of course, like none of my movies I feel like are really big names, but The Words has
Okay.
Bradley Cooper and so Saldana in it.
Okay.
Um, and I think I really like it because the reason being because I would like to be like more of a writer. Like I really, I like to read a lot, so I'm definitely more of a reader than a movie watcher, which is
Mhm.
probably also why my movies are all over the place. But um but I like that because, it like went into like how hard it was to write, and
Mhm.
ultimately he ended up stealing the book and writing this, saying it was his. So that just gave an element of interestingness to it, but I would say that one.
And I know that about you, that you're a very avid reader. And like I'm trying to remember when in my life that kind of shifted, but like I used to just what I spent most of my time doing was reading.
Yeah.
Always was like had my face in a book. And then it was probably college when it's like you could throw in a movie and it's done in like an hour and a half, 2 hours. A book is a commitment.
I was gonna say it's a little more of a commitment.
And obviously like sometimes I get really busy with the semester going on and stuff like that with school, and like I still have a book that I started in August. Still need to finish it.
Fine, details. It's details.
And then I look at like I have a couple piles of books that I need to read because I haven't read them yet. And it's just like I need to get back into that. But like I always appreciate films that talk about writing and stuff like that, because and there's a lot of great ones, whether it's like talking about procrastination, like I love the Coen brothers, and they have a film called Barton Fink, which is about like this famous New York playwright who gets hired by the movies to come out to the West and write movies. And he's tasked with like, he's this guy who makes like proletarian art for the people. And they're like, you need to write this wrestling movie. And he's just like sitting there, like, has like one line and is just like sitting at his typewriter. Cause like this takes place in, I think, either the 30s or 40s. And he's just like sitting at his typewriter and he can't write a thing. And it was inspired because the Coen brothers were experiencing their own writer's block. And it's
Yeah.
such an interesting thing. And there's one movie that came out in the last couple of years that I really, really loved, and it's called The Wife. And it has Glenn
I feel like I've
Close,
heard that.
and she plays the wife of a really famous writer who's about to get the Nobel Prize for his writing. And like it's about them journeying over to accept his award and the tension boiling over because like it starts to come the question, who really wrote the books? Was it him or was it her? And then it deals with those ideas of like she was a woman and he was a man, he was like a professor and everything. And
Would it have been as successful if she had come out with her name on it?
and
But
like,
now it's getting all these accolades, and who really deserves them?
exactly. So if anybody has watching this that hasn't checked out The Wife before, definitely recommend it.
Sounds really good.
Now, Erin, do you have any characters, like movie characters that you feel like you connect with on a personal level?
This one was the hard one for me. This one was the one I got stuck on. And I will say, I always explain my friends this way too. I feel like, and everybody is like this to some extent, but I'm sure we all think about it differently. I have so many different facets of my personality that I always feel like I can find something in a character to relate to. So this one I got stuck on because I was like, I don't know if I can find just one that really I like truly like connect more than any other one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think you go into watching a movie with the right state of mind too, because I feel like I know people that it's just like, I couldn't relate to this movie. It's just like, there had to be something in there that you can make that kind of connection to. And it's like being able to think about it's like, I've been in a situation like that. It's just like maybe I haven't been like fighting supervillains and stuff like that, but like I've had a moment where it's like I question my abilities and
Mhm.
having those kinds of moments. And this is probably the hardest question that I ask too, because like really trying to think about that. And then you're also sitting there thinking like, what does this say about me that I
Yes.
connect
Well,
with
yeah.
this character?
And it's always the thing, yeah, and it's always the thing where it's like if you pick one that you relate to too, it's kind of like tying yourself to the way they handled situations. And sometimes it's like, yeah, I could relate to the character, but I'd like to think. So I always like to say that. I'd like to think that in their dilemma, maybe I would have handled it differently.
It might not have been as dramatic and movie worthy,
Right.
but I probably would have handled this differently. Well, and
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing too, because it's like obviously people are complex and we have so many different aspects to us. And it's hard to really create a character that you can really learn that much about in the course of one film and really build that connection. It's just like, I know like my answer to this one, like obviously I wrote all these questions, like I've thought about my answers to these. And like that was an interesting one. And what popped up into my head was the film Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Oh, good one.
And I'm like, obviously I haven't experienced all the things that our protagonist in Perks of Being a Wallflower has experienced, luckily, because some stuff that
Dark.
happens in that.
It gets a
But
little
like
dark.
I definitely related to being that quiet kid. You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't get that now. Most people probably watching this, but like now I don't shut up, and sometimes figure out when to.
We
But
have
like,
that in common. It's fine.
but like growing up, like before college, I sent 10 sentences a day.
Hmm.
And like I was Charlie, and just like that kid's just like I got voted nicest to everybody by my high school.
Mm.
But did anybody really know me
Right.
and really get to know me? But like I was that quiet, happy kid that was nice to everybody. And it's like
Mhm.
it was interesting because like I've had those moments where it's like I really like somebody, but was like petrified to say something to them.
100%.
And like some of those people I never did.
Yeah,
And some
they
of those
never
people
knew.
I have, and it's just like, or sometimes it's like it comes out of nowhere. But like, I love that. Like, I remember watching that film. I watched it in college too. I think I was trying to remember when that came out, but like, I remember watching that. I'm like, this hit me hard. Like, I connected to this a lot. And luckily, I read the book
Yeah.
sometime last year. And that's always an interesting and tricky thing too. It's like, as you could probably relate when you read a book and then it's like, oh, they're turning this to a movie, and you're just like, don't ruin it. And
Yes, very much so. I'm usually like, I can't watch the movie. The book was good, like really good. I'm gonna let you try.
well, and that's the thing, because it's like, oh my God, this book made money, then we can make movie money. And then you turn it into that, or you do have somebody that had such a strong connection to it and wanted to adapt it.
Yeah, yeah.
Or sometimes somebody's like, this is a cool idea, but I'm going to do my own thing, which is like Stanley Kubrick and like The Shining, which is why Stephen King hates the movie. But, and it's an interesting thing. Now, Erin, do you have any movies that you feel like people would be surprised to hear that you really like?
Um, yes. So I kind of went with, I thought The Family was like probably going to be surprising to hear that I liked, or maybe even like comedy drama with like Step Brothers and such, just because it's, I always think the first thing you say is like kind of pretty impactful. And like your first question was, what's your favorite movie? And like, oh, Good Will Hunting and The Town. And it's like, then you all like start to think that that person like likes all of, those intellectual, like really well written, very like dramatic movies. And then I'm like, popping in with Step Brothers and like The Family, like, so it's like, I kind of thought that that one might be surprising to hear. And well, and also because I'm the same as you. I think I'm perceived as very nice and, very like, I'm very not, I don't love conflict. Like I'll go out of my way to like make sure that those don't happen, And so anyway, so I feel like that's why people would probably be surprised to be like, oh, okay, but you like these like super violent, conflict driven movies.
Well, and well, and that's interesting too. And it's like that expectation, because it's like a raunchy, like I think Step Brothers like gets that it's like a raunchy guy movie.
Yes.
And
Yep. It does.
like
Yeah.
it's like if you're a guy, you probably watch Will Ferrell movies and laugh at Will Ferrell movies. And like I remember because like I feel like when people it's like first started like finding out, it's like I watch a lot of different things. So like watch basically anything, but like some of my favorite movies, yeah, they're pretty violent.
Hmm.
And like I love action movies. And like 8-year-old Shane would watch all the James Bond movies. And like I never idolized James Bond. I would like to think that I wasn't a like self-absorbed like womanizer like James Bond, but it's just like I always loved watching those movies even when I was a kid. And
Right.
it's interesting because like you have those expectations that people have of you, and like it's one of the reasons why, because like I've written a couple of screenplays and like I have ideas, and I'm afraid to show it to some people that I know because they might be a little surprised about what I wrote.
Because it doesn't jive with how people look at you. I think when you said perception, I was like, yeah, that's it. Like that's where I feel like sometimes that question was hitting on is like what movies, because what you like says a lot about you too. And so it's kind of like, people might see you one way, but once they find out the things you like, it's kind of like, oh, okay, you have a bit of a different side to you. Like
Well, and it's funny because like I know when you met me, I'm trying to think like people used to call me Campus Wolverine. when I was an undergrad, and I looked like a wolf man. And occasionally I do. I don't really grow my beard a whole lot anymore because gotta look professional. But also, it's like
I'm old now.
you've seen me. It's like I show up to work in a suit, and
Yeah.
I've been in vests and stuff like that, and it's just like it gives off a specific expectation of somebody. And
Yes.
like if you sit down and actually get to know me, it's
No, you're a regular person.
like I feel like I'm approachable
Yeah.
and I'm funny sometimes. Oh, like the thing. And it's like you get a laugh out of some people. And it's like you have those different kinds of expectations. And I really like that question because it's like I remember I had my brother on here. You wouldn't expect like a 30-year-old guy to be like pretty in pink. And like my brother loves John Hughes films. And like there's some rom-coms that I really, really enjoy. Like my friend Kevin and I love Me Before You. We got to see a screening of that, and I'm just like, this movie's so charming. I really
It's so
enjoyed it.
well, and it's hard. Like I feel like it says it too in that that type of movie also hits at like a bigger issue and a bigger life purpose kind of thing, like and it's just and there's so many elements that can be to it, so it's hard to also fit movies sometimes into these genres or categories because it sometimes make it it's such a wide range even within a genre.
Well, and it's so interesting because the most interesting films are the ones you're like, what the hell was this?
Where
And
does this fit?
I don't even know how to describe this because, and like continue about expectations, it's like when you put a genre on something, then you set up a certain expectation. And
Yeah.
it's like you say something's a horror movie, then you're automatically like, if you don't like horror movies, like I can't watch that, I'm gonna get scared. But like there's a big difference between like watching a Conjuring movie, which there's gonna be weird, creepy, supernatural stuff popping out at you, and then watching something that's horrifying because it's a very human thing.
Yeah, psychopath or something. Yeah, it's very different.
Like you, I know can exist. You maybe exist. Don't know for sure, but hope not
But
because
like to pretend you don't.
yeah. And it's just like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Now, my last question for you, Erin, is what do you love most about movies?
I would say I like when they really make you think, and I like when they can take an issue and kind of, even if they take you to like a different time period or something, and they just, I guess I like sometimes the intellect behind a
Mhm.
movie, it can really take you to like make you think about things in a different way or make you think about something that maybe you had never thought. Like, I think all the time, like, and Newsroom's a good example, right? Where it's kind of like, in this world and age of media, like I'm a very like, I try to be very conscious about what I consume because it's just there's so much, it's 24-hour news cycle, it's everything. And granted, it's fiction, so you have to keep that in mind too, right? It may not be perfect, but to see how they work behind the scenes, and to see how like it kind of boils down to as much as you might not agree or you might like want to do things differently, like everybody's trying the best they can, everyone's trying to put out and do their job the best way they can. And their intentions are there. Like intentions are typically good. They're more good than they are bad most of the time. So I kind of like that movies can give you a behind the scenes kind of look and just maybe make you, even if you still don't agree, it can at least allow you to look at things in a different light.
And that's interesting. And like you watch the newsroom, and obviously you have like Jeff Daniels' character who's like out there on the news talking about these things.
Yeah.
But the amount of people that are just there sitting at their desks expected to do all this research and do all these different kinds of things, it's just like they're regular people just doing their job and
100%.
deal with the same BS like work space environment kinds of things. It's just like my boss yelled at me. They
Mm-hmm.
just happen to have their boss as a man that goes on television. And like I would not want to work for Jeff Daniels' character in that. It's a
No.
lot. But
It's a lot.
And that's always interesting, like being able to say, because like the interesting thing about the newsroom is like all those things happened. Like,
Yes, I like real events. They used real. It was amazing.
and it's just like, I remember when that happened.
Yeah.
I remember seeing it all over the news. And you can have something like that. And then you could have the same kind of themes and ideas being explored in something like Anchorman 2, The Legend Continues, which is basically a farce about 24-hour news. And
Yeah.
it's just like, this movie's going there, and I did not expect this. And it's just like they're talking about like the Australian guy that owns this network owns airlines. He doesn't want them reporting on bad things happening with his airlines, and it's like synergy. And it's just like this stuff happens all the time.
Well,
And
right. And I always think too, like when I said it's like, it all goes there, and there's still room for human error in a lot of those things, right? So it's like you can get frustrated with the 24-hour news cycle, and you hold news to this high regard because they're telling you what's going on in the world, and they have to be perfect and good all the time, but it's still just people doing it. Still people having to make judgment calls, having to do, when you said research, it made me think of all this, because I was like, yeah, you still, it's a human person sitting down having to comb through like these giant reports and all this data and figure out what to give the people. So it's, and that's a hard job. Like that's tough.
well, and it's interesting, and I don't know why this popped in my head, but like just thinking about over the weekend, it's just like a website like Yahoo just has so many different articles from so many different places. And I'm just sitting there, and they live stream NFL playoff games. And I'm just sitting there trying to watch the game on my phone. And
Mm-hmm.
have all these articles all around them. Like, do I really want to click on this? And like the term doom scrolling and just going through
Doom
things. And just,
scrolling.
like, I shouldn't be reading all these articles today. But it's
Yeah.
just like, certain movies, certain TV shows bring that to life and make you think about things. And I feel like that's one thing I really love about films is like you can get a perspective on different things that you would never have experienced on your own.
No, and it allows you to just kind of, that's probably just my favorite part, just seeing a perspective, and in a deeper way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what's nice. I mean, yeah, it's only 2 hours, right? But it's usually about one specific event or thing, and one big underlying message, like, hey, maybe this is how, a lot of the world saw it, but this is how it was in that time and in that moment and in that judgment call. And it's like, once you have the context of a lot of things, you again, like I said, you may not agree, but you can understand how they got where they are. And the understanding, I think, is just I don't know, that's one of like a better thing to have than just being critical. If you have the understanding, you're like, okay, like I can, maybe I would make the same call. I don't know.
It's like I can see where somebody's coming from.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the hardest thing is trying
Yeah.
to see where others are coming from. But now, the last thing here on Lost in the Wasteland is Erin, you get to ask me a question.
Okay. So that was a lot, and I like social science, so this is probably where my question's going to come from. But I guess, what scene or movie got the biggest emotional response from you?
There's so I'm gonna bring up two. One brought up like legitimate anger in me, and one made me really, really sad.
No,
And one is I don't know if there's many films that give me such a visceral reaction as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
okay.
And have you ever seen that?
No.
So it takes place, actually, when does it? I feel like it takes place in like the 60s. It's based off of a novel, and it's about this wild card kind of guy played by Jack Nicholson who gets put into an asylum and taken out of prison because they think he's mentally unstable. And then over the course of the film, he tries to bring life back to all of these people that deal with mental illness inside this asylum, all at the behest of Nurse Ratched, who is the nurse that runs the ward. And my God, I hate that woman. And I remember watching that film for the first time, and this is the crazy thing is I feel this intensely every time I watch it still.
So you know it
And
was a good scene or a
there's
good movie.
there's a particular moment towards the end of the film where does something really unethical, and it leads to a tragedy. And Jack Nicholson's response is to choke the life out of her. And I got just as mad at Jack Nicholson's character in that moment watching the film. I'm like, I want to see him like choke her. And
Yeah. You're like, this is feeding me now.
and it's just like I could feel it through the screen. I'm just like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it hit me that hard. Now, the one that makes me really sad is like I've been an X-Men fan since like the first X-Men movie came out when I was like 9. And I've watched every single one of them. And like Wolverine has been one of my favorite characters like most of my life. And watching Logan and getting to the end of that movie, and I guess if you haven't seen Logan and you really don't want this spoiled for you, spoilers,
Spoiler alert.
he dies. And I teared up sitting in the theater, and I got like, it really hit me. And the worst part was he's lying there dying, and his daughter grabs his hand, and he's just like, so this is what this feels like dying, because this is a man who's lived, I guess, close to 200 years.
Oh, God.
And it's just like, this movie's not getting me like this. And just sitting and as a fan who's seen all the X-Men films, in the previous Wolverine film, one of the characters can see people's deaths. And she told him, I see you dying with your heart in your hand.
Oh.
And in the context of that movie, you think it's literal. Like having his heart in his hand, and then you see him die in Logan holding his daughter's hand. I'm like, nope.
I'm all done here. I can't take this anymore. Oh.
I can't handle this. I'm even feeling some ways right now. And like that hit me. And it's funny because it's like, it's a superhero movie. But you know what? When you make that connection with a character for like, he was Wolverine for 17 years. And to think about that, that's more than half my life.
Yeah.
And like, I felt some ways at the end of Avengers Endgame too. Also another movie where I cried. So it's just like, sometimes
it's every movie for me. It's fine.
You know, it really works. Gets you upset. But like, those are two things that like really stick with me that really got me emotionally.
Oh, those are good. Like, those are good connections. Like, those are good scenes. Oh,
that was a good question. I appreciated that.
Oh, good.
Well, Erin, thank you for coming on the show. It's always fun to chat with you, and this is an interesting new dynamic to be chatting about, specifically just movies. And maybe sometime in the future, like I'm probably going to be looping back around doing this again with everyone with different questions, obviously. I'm not going to answer the same exact ones. That would be ridiculous. But so I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate all of you for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.
Thanks for having me, Shane.